this last part of the video, I'd like to talk a little bit from, let's say, the artist's point of view. I'd like to talk about the success or failure, or what I like and what I don't like about this image and how it all worked out. Now I think it would be good to talk about how I feel about the image and how I think it worked or didn't work. So let's start by talking about the concept of the image that came to me as an idea. Most of my projects just appear in my mind kind of as images or ideas. Sometimes they're intellectual constructs, like I'm thinking right now about how I might illustrate the idea that humanity is destroying the oceans. So that's an intellectual approach to an image. But a lot of times images appear to me in my mind. They come from a dream, or they just pop up sometime, anywhere, anytime during the day, or something's been percolating in my mind and it gets triggered by looking at somebody else's work. This is Rodin's sculpture, The Thinker, and I've seen this in person because there is one of the originals. I believe he made 6 of them in San Francisco, where I have observed it. Something about this pose triggered in me an idea in conjunction with Stephan Morel's ministry room, which you saw previously, and somehow those two triggered the idea of substituting a female figure for the thinker and putting her in that dysfunctional dystopia image of this wonderful room that Stephan created. And that's kind of how this whole project got started. So that's how the project got started, and then the next question is, what's to like? How successful do I think it has been? How do I feel about it? What do I like and not like? In terms of popularity, it's been quite a popular image. People seem to like it, so that's gratifying. It did come out pretty much the way that I had visualized it, which, you know, that's a good sign and makes me feel good. I don't know what popularity really means. A lot of times the images that I care for the least turn out to be the most popular, and I see the same thing in other image makers, that they're often surprised by what the public likes and surprised by the way that their favorite images are not the favorite of the public, of their audience. So I don't know what to say about that. I think Stephan Morel's room, even though it's practically invisible, is perfect for this image, so I feel good about that. I think that the pose was good. I feel that the skin texture that I created with David Burdick's great Skin View product came out pretty well. Let's take a look at that, by the way. I made a comparison image to show the default texture on the left hand side that comes with the Victoria 4.2 model. So if you don't make any changes and you import Victoria 4.2 into View Infinite, this is what the texture will look like, the item on the left. The right hand side is the skin texture that I created using David Burdick's very nice Skin View skin shader product that we talked about earlier. And I should point out that it's not a very perfect comparison because the right hand image has a lot more contrast, just in the way the lighting was done and the exposure. But I think you'll see that it's a useful comparison. A lot of people, when they see today's 3D human models, they often say that they look like mannequins, or that the skin doesn't look realistic, and you can see why. On the left hand side it does look kind of like a plaster model, something like that. It doesn't quite have the reality. I'm also pleased with the way that the lighting came out in View Infinite. Those of you who know me know that I'm very much involved in light and color. So setting up spotlights and setting up the lighting in every scene is a big deal for me. I get a lot of pleasure out of it, and this is no exception. It's pretty obvious that the spotlight is really the determining factor in this whole image, and totally responsible for the success of the image such as it is. And let's look a bit at the details here. You see that the color of the spotlight is not white. I used a bit of a skin tone. the softness setting down here, which has to do with how hard-edged the shadows will be and what happens at the edges of the spotlight, it's set for a very slight softness, so the shadows are not going to be totally hard-edged, which is a digital unreality thing. A lot of people object to the hard-edged shadows you get in a lot of 3D programs, and of course they're not realistic. The sun only has sharp shadows very, very close to objects and doesn't have sharp shadows any distance away. Of course, this is a spotlight, it's not the sun, but still I used a softness factor to improve that and prevent the hard edge that would have happened at the edge of the lighting. The spread of the spotlight, which controls how fuzzy it gets, is set to only 5 degrees. More typical would be something like 20 or 30 or 40 degrees, even up to 100. So 5 is a very narrow spotlight with a very sharp edge. And the fall off of the spotlight, which is the control down here for how wide the area is that becomes more and more fuzzy in the fall off of the spotlight edge, I've set for quite a small setting. So it's a sharp, small, narrowly focused spotlight. Also, I did some settings in the shadows here. I'm letting the shadows go to 100% darkness because this is supposed to be a contrasty light. But I did set the softness quality here to my own special custom settings. In other words, in order to calculate the smooth, soft edges of the shadows, there's a lot of calculation that goes on. So to prevent little grainy dots from appearing, I had to set this for a threshold of quality threshold, you can see, of 98%. So this is one of those settings in any 3D program where you sacrifice render time in order to get the kind of quality you want. This probably boosted the render time by a factor of 4 or more. So I'm quite happy with the lighting setup. I think it came out pretty well. You'll notice here that I paid particular attention to the shadows of her eyelashes. I was really struck by the way that the spotlight made her long eyelashes flow across her face there. So I adjusted the spotlight the way that it's aimed to help with that particular effect. And again, as I showed before, you can see that by viewing through the spotlight as if your eye was in the spotlight looking at the subject, you can see in the lower right hand viewport that the edge of the spotlight is right on the side of her face. So it's quite a critical aiming to get the contour of her cheek and forehead and chin to be just the way I wanted, and also to illuminate just enough of her hand, not to show too much. And also it was really critical that I aim this just right, because there was a light that appeared down on her chest where some of the light would kind of poke through behind her hand, cast a shaft of light across the top of her chest, which looked pretty strange. So it was a very careful narrowing of the spotlight and very careful aiming to get just the part that I wanted to be illuminated.